Hi, Nancy. Thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks so much, Pete. How you doing?
Good, good. We met through a like a platform. So in podcasting world, it's sometimes referrals, everything else, but in this case, it's kind of a community platform, a network platform. So that's awesome. I'm glad we could connect here. So you have an interesting story. You were in corporate America for quite a while, and then you made a big jump or a big shift, and you went to the art world, specifically with glass in this arena through that art. But I think your journey, I didn't even hear it yet, but I'm really inspired to hear it because I think there's a lot of people out there that want to make a change, want to jump. There's books that are unwritten, speeches given, there's art to be had, or music, whatever that is for us, an individual level, and those expressions. The leap or the shift is sometimes a big barrier or a small barrier. And it's kind of in there. But sorry, I'll kind of hand the mic to you. But thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was corporate and a lot of different positions. I kind of jumped around. Part of me is I've learned that I need to make a difference. It doesn't have to be a huge difference, but I need to be able to make a difference in whatever I'm doing. And so I would stay with a job. And when I was kind of done with making any kind of changes I could make or helping improve processes or something, it was time for me to move. And so I went literally from an personnel, because it was way back then, HR and payroll, to just personnel in general, and then over to motion pictures. I was
Oh.
at ABC Entertainment, and I went from their personnel office over to motion picture division. And my boss took me from there with no experience. I learned very quickly because I learned I can learn anything I want. It's
Yeah.
really the funniest thing, but I didn't set boundaries to myself that I can't do something. I've always been, even as a child, I can do anything and I can learn it. So I went with my boss then to Columbia Pictures, and I learned that when your boss leaves, you're out of a job.
Oh, interesting. So it's more of a team. It's kind of a team or a smaller team dynamic that they kind of shift around.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And I get it, but at the same time, as the person who doesn't have any control in any of that, um, I had to figure out what to do. And it was an interesting conversation with different people with their recommendations and what I should do. And at the time, Columbia Pictures was owned by Coca Cola 100%. And so that was back in the early 80s. And I went to one of the executives, I was talking to him because he was a friend. And he said, there's something very fascinating about you. And I'm like, oh, you don't care if you're talking to the president of the company or the Coca Cola executives or the mail person. You treat them all equally. And I laughed
That's a
because I'd
nice
never even
compliment
thought about
too.
treating anybody differently. And I looked at him and I just kind of chuckled. I said, the mail guy does more for me than the others do, but they haven't given me a reason not to respect them. So I'd prefer to give everyone respect and treat them well. And he goes, that's why you're going to do well no matter where you decide to go. So he helped
Yeah.
me get some positions over in the development area for motion pictures. And again, when your boss left, you were out of a job and people's contracts would expire. So I ended up jumping over to IT. And I had
Hmm.
taken programming in college on punch cards on a mainframe. Laptops didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And I learned I didn't really care for Pascal or Fortran, but I understood the concepts. So I figured IT would be a good spot for me. And I moved up the totem pole because I could make a lot of help there. That was probably the biggest place I made a difference. And it was putting operations together and processes together and procedures together to make other people's lives better and easier
Hmm.
so that we could all be on the same page. And that was so important to me. And
Yeah.
then I had a new boss, and that was kind of awkward. So I ended up leaving into other corporations that were all technology related. Toshiba, IBM. At that
Oh,
point,
wow.
laptops
Yeah.
and desktops were out, cell phones were coming out already. And I just moved from different companies based on how they made me feel
Yeah.
and how I felt. Sometimes I left because I thought it was a somewhat toxic environment. I know it's hard
Sure.
those exist, but I think all of us have experienced it sometime or another. I hope
Absolutely.
most people have not. And I ended up being in a position where I was dating again. It had been a long time since I was divorced. I was a single mom, and my daughter and I were having a great time. But it was time for me to she was getting older, and, I'd like to have companionship again. And I met my second husband, and he had his own technology company here in Thousand Oaks area of California. And he's like, instead of you working for these other big corporations, you should be working for our business and helping us grow. And he goes, you're an incredible salesperson. You're an incredible ops person. He goes, we need that. Of course, in my mind, am I going to go work for my husband? I've heard too many stories about that not working.
Sure, sure.
Is that going to work? What am I going to do if it doesn't? But, in my heart, I stopped listening to my mind and all the noise that happens. And I sat and I just concentrated on it and meditated on it and realized, no, it's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was there 17 years. I was the chief operating officer for most of that. And we doubled in size. And then my husband was ready to retire. And I didn't know what I was going to do next. So I started trying a bunch of different things. And through all of this, I've tried electronics, I've tried ceramics, I tried sewing, knitting, crocheting, um, music. Nothing really ever clicked for me. So in my mind, I was not a artistic or creative person. And it bothered me, but it didn't, because my dad, my sister are so talented. And I just figured, not everybody in the family gets that, gene. And I had been introduced because of my mom to a thing called fused glass.
Hmm.
My folks were in a retirement assisted living facility, and someone was coming on site and teaching fused glass. I'd never heard of it. I've heard of blown glass, stained glass, mosaic, sea glass, but never fused glass. And so I thought, wow, this would be great for something for me to do with my mom. We really haven't had a lot of things. We used to cook together and bake together, and that was fun. But we haven't done that in so many years, and she doesn't want to cook anymore, and she doesn't want to bake anymore. So I took a class, and it was an amazing experience. Now, part of me was saying, why am I wasting money taking a class when I know I'm not artistic and I'm just going to come up with something that's junk? Why would I do this? Why would I waste my money? And I had to stop listening to my head and listen to my heart. And my heart saying, I'm doing it for mom. Of course I'm going to do this. It's something we can do together. And she doesn't care if I'm good at it or not. Doesn't matter. And I was hooked.
That's
And
awesome.
mom was so excited that I had something to do with her. So my mom's 85th birthday was coming up, and this particular location had just opened up here in the Thousand Oaks area of a fused glass studio. So we set up for my mom to have her birthday party here, and we gave her little invitations to pass out to her friends, and the bus from the assisted living facility brought them over. And we had her birthday party here. And her friends, most of them were taking the same class she was, were just elated. They couldn't believe the sight. They couldn't believe all the art they were seeing. They had such a good time. And mom heard about it for months, which just made her beam that her friends had such a good time at her party. And then my husband sold the business.
Okay.
And I had been coming back to the studio to do art and was really enjoying it and trying to help where I could. I'd sweep floors, I'd fill the jars, anything I could do to help, because that's my personality. I want to help. And so I ended up learning a lot of things, not because I ever thought I was going to have a studio of my own, but because I was helping somebody. And that made me feel really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then they decided to close this location. Exactly. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Now, at that point, I'd been doing fused glass for about a little over a year. And I went to my husband, and his first comment was, you are not getting the garage. Dear honey, what should I do? What are you thinking? And he said, well, you know how to run a business. You ran my small business for many years. You're a business person. You're perfectly capable of running a business. Open your own. And I thought, well, I could always hire people to teach what I don't know. I mean, I know a lot,
Hmm.
but what I don't know, I can always hire someone. So I talked to some of my friends and I talked to a mentor that they all agreed I should absolutely do it. I'm so passionate about it and I love talking about it and sharing it that it will just work and it will be fine and it will just come together as it should. So in the
Yeah.
back of my mind, I broke the glass ceiling from corporate and I jumped ship. And it was hard in corporate. Towards the end, corporate was not quite the same as when I first started. A lot of technology was being bought up by other
Hmm.
companies, and the companies we were representing were no longer in business anymore. And that was hard to face a customer saying, "Yes, I sold you this product, 2 years ago, but they're out of business now. You have to buy something new."
Hmm.
That was not a comfortable feeling for me in any way, shape, or form. So I
Yeah.
was really, really ready to jump. I was not going to stay in corporate in any way, shape, or form. And so I ended up starting my own glass art studio.
Now, did you take the one that you were talking about that was closing? Did you acquire that, or did you start one from scratch?
I started one from scratch because the other one was part of another brand, another company, and
Yep.
I wanted my own. I didn't want to work for somebody else. And even though they are a great company and they're still functioning other places, it wasn't for me.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so January 1st, 2020, I
Okay.
took the lease on my studio.
That timing is interesting
Yes,
because,
a few months later, I opened the
yeah,
doors to the public, and 5 weeks later, COVID hit and shut California down completely.
yes, for quite a while. Wow.
So, honestly, my journey through that was unbelievable to me. I started off with woe is me, and I just took
Sure.
on this lease and I just took all
Yeah.
this inventory and everything.
Yeah.
And
Especially if you were following your passion and you were following inspired action. Um, that's got to kind of hit a little bit there too, just because you're like, wait, no, I'm on the right course. I know this is right. I felt right at everything. And then you're like, wait a second, how did I just get hit by a truck? Kind of, essentially in business.
exactly. And, it was a mind shift again. Instead of looking at it as I just got hit by a bus, I looked at it with, all my life, I have wished there was more time in the day. I wish I
Mm,
had more time at the end of the day where I could spend with my daughter or on the weekends where I wasn't so tired from commuting. I wish I had this time. And suddenly I was granted the time. And so I would come into the studio by myself and I had been watching videos. There's some fantastic instructors that have videos online. And I watched them and I practiced and I played. And it was so therapeutic. And I would say my passion is fuse glass, and that's therapeutic for me. But I really know that any type of
hmm.
activity that you're passionate about, or you don't even know if you are yet or not, maybe you love music, or maybe you love journaling, or writing, or baking, or sewing. Having a passionate thing in your life and doing it throughout your life and not waiting till you're later in life is really an amazing gift to give yourself and to take the time. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. I mean, if you set up for, 15 minutes a week, half an hour a week to do what you're passionate about, your mindset and your mental health will be so much better than getting wrapped up in all of the gossip and the negative activities out there and the things going on in the world. You find your little sanctuary to do your thing. And that's what I had now. I was so happy, even with all the things happening outside the door. When I walked
Hmm.
into my studio, all of that just disappeared. And it was an eerie feeling to know that so much stuff was happening outside my doors, but inside my studio, it was joy. It was passion. It was joy. It was happiness. And I was creating beautiful things.
Oh, that's incredible. So a few different things. One is let me go backwards. So I did want to touch on that right there because you were you were present. You were present in the moment, and that ease of in our soul's journey and our heart space to be present with something and doing something. And you use the word there too, play. You're playing with it and experimenting. I mean, that's creating your environment. And when people do that, and it's something that's just kind of fun and exploratory and then almost childlike wonder when we're learning and doing that, I mean, that's a very powerful thing. And to feel the presence of that and kind of, yes, the world, the world around us can be chaotic, but in this space, this is my space, my time. Then you probably even kind of, and you lose yourself too. You lose yourself in time. You could go for hours and not even realize it.
Exactly. It
Yeah,
happened regularly.
yeah, yeah. That's neat. And the time thing is really interesting because you kind of said that beautifully when you were saying it, where it was like I asked for time, I wish for time, and I think I'll just speak from personal experience. I think many of us do that too. It's like I kind of have those little wishes and thoughts. It's like spending more time with my kids and my wife, and or hobbies or things that are productive or creative outlets, and it's just kind of those little wish lists. I mean, we put them off, we're like, all right, but I got to get through my to-do list today. And I just got to get through this instead of the turn of the words of I get to do this and I get to explore and I get to spend time, there really is those mind shifts and they're extremely powerful because if you get stuck in some of those to-dos, obligations, it can weigh on you after a while.
Absolutely. And especially when you can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
we can dig a hole for ourselves. It's really deep and you think you can't get out of it. And then you can almost imagine, oh, wait a minute. Look, there's another door over here. I can go through that door. What's over there? And all of a sudden, this hole that you dug for yourself has an exit path.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's mindset. And
it
mindset
is.
is such a term that so many people use in so many ways. I mean, ego to me is the same thing. My ego didn't like the idea that I couldn't do something or I wasn't going to be able to. Well, I
Yeah,
changed that.
yeah. And it's interesting that you brought up mindset because my podcast is named Intrinsic Mindset. So I don't want to say that it's changed its meaning for me, but in a sense, it's kind of evolved a little bit. And there's times in my life where I thought mindset was fixed, but it's not. The incredible mindsets that propel us and help us grow and create these beautiful, fun journeys are flexible and they flow. And they're somewhat states of being within the mindset of allowance and awareness.
Absolutely.
Because in your corporate world, before we get too far down the conversation, the word contributor kept coming up. So the way you describe that and the way I was picking up on it is being a contributor. And that there's not many contributors. I do believe everybody wants to contribute in their own way. But I think they have the courage and to have the comfort and to be a contributor and to stick your neck out because I think sometimes it's easy to hide in the corner of a corporate environment or a business environment. Don't stick your neck out too far because you're going to look stupid, feel stupid, be ridiculed, or whatever that is. But I think that there's a real powerful lesson there because having a room full of contributors can be a powerful environment and helping to lift people, helping to recognize people, recognize the strengths, and creating a vulnerable environment where it's not overly critical or overly criticizing. I think there's a real power to what you kind of touched on there. We didn't really elaborate on it, but we really touched on being a contributor in that environment.
Yeah. It's different in every company, what I've tried to do and where I've tried to make
Sure.
changes. When I was working at Sony Pictures, Sony ultimately bought it, made it Sony Pictures Entertainment when I was in the corporate world. We had Price Waterhouse in for a project, and they had a whole group of people. And we were all sitting there. I'd raise my hand because they were asking us to step outside the box. Come on, be more creative. And I'd say something. They say, no, you get back in the box. And everyone started laughing because I'm not a person you put in a box.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm fairly outspoken, but I try to do it in a warm and compassionate way
Yeah.
and trying to share. I think the part that a lot of times people miss is sharing the value for everyone. So I can tell
Yes.
you why it might be
Yes.
better for me, but why is it also better for my coworker in the next department
Mhm.
or the coworker from the previous department or for the end user? What are the
Yeah.
other people going to get by this change? And when you've looked at it from a lot of different directions and talked to other people about it as well and seen that they agree, they're afraid to speak up. That's okay. That's what I'm here for. Sharing my voice for other artists or for other creators or for other team members. I've always been very confident with that.
And it's important. It's almost having the allowance and creating the environment for them to be within their best and highest and be within their skills and their strengths. That's what truly can make a great leader, is instead of the imposing of the idea or imposing of the thought process, creating, standing up and sticking up for what we'll call the environment, either a state of mind or the actual within the physical arena of this, and the emotional mental capacities of them being able to step out and them being able to express their strengths and their, without feeling criticized, without feeling being attacked or anything like that too. Because because there's deep levels. I don't want to get too far off on this, but I was, just deep levels that's can tie into deep levels of survival. Am I going to lose my job? Or, it goes really deep for some people, and they'll conform, or they'll tell the environment what they want to hear. Like, oh, the box, I recognize the box. Everybody's told me what the box is. So, okay, I'll say something within the box so that I have acceptance within the box. But it takes people to tread the path and create the environments for them to expand the expression of everybody.
Exactly. And I had a situation where purchasing had a set of directives they were given, and I had a set of directions that I was given. And there were some conflicts between those two.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and talked to the manager, and I just said, I understand this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of what you're going by directive wise. And she says, no, that's exactly what it is. And I said, here's where I'm at. And we need to find a middle ground if we can, and figure out how we make it work for both to be successful and for neither of us to look bad.
Mm-hmm.
And she was so taken back because she usually just has people yelling at her. And I said, no, just the opposite. We're going to do this together. So we actually went to the controller and explained why we came together and why we want to find a successful solution for both of us that is best for the company. And he was taken back by people actually wanting to find that commonality that worked. But we did it privately first, so there wasn't anybody feeling like they were, being backstabbed or whatever the terms they are using. It was absolutely for the positive and the best for everyone. And when I worked for IBM and Toshiba and a lot of these other companies, I always wanted to represent the product to make the manufacturer look good. But I also
Mm-hmm.
recognized after being in IT, I needed to make the person I'm talking to in the IT department or the purchasing department, I needed to make them look good as well. They needed to understand things well enough that when they were questioned why this product or this manufacturer, what makes them different, they had an answer that they were comfortable with and that they
Yeah.
believed in. And, whoever I was working for was happy that I was doing my job properly. And I love those win 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 situations. I've been in enough situations where you're told something and your gut says, I, I'm not sure I believe that.
Yeah.
When you ask questions, people don't really want to give you the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I push back.
Mm-hmm.
And if they push too much, I say, you know what? This isn't going to work for me. And they get so taken back because they think they're the hottest thing on earth. It's got to be right for everybody, whichever side of the table I'm on.
Yeah. There's a real joy and a real peace with helping other people in that arena, standing up for them. I'd actually like to jump into the creative world. I do have some specific questions about the glass, but I'd actually like to jump the essence of creation, the creative, the art. I think there's a couple different things that I'd like to share with you and get your thoughts on. We can always dice these down differently, but I kind of believe that creativity or the expression of creation is like things like this with a glass or whatever the version is for whoever's listening. Um, I don't believe that it's necessarily in a vacuum. So, I mean, the intention is to share, but it's also interesting because I think I kind of, and bear with me when I'm saying I think, it's the essence of the creation is more valuable than the market value, meaning that like you're kind of, it's not about creating something that you can just sell. You're like, oh, well, I'm going to create this. So it's got a giraffe on it so I can capture the market people that like giraffes or something. I'm making something up very
I like
obscure,
it.
but is the commerce aspect of it. The creation is meant for a couple different things. One, I believe it's in a very, very healthy, positive way. And I'm going to use the word selfish, but it's not self. It's for us. When we create art for us, that we find love and we're playing with it, and we're exploring with it and having the adventure. That I truly believe, and I've heard this from other people as well too. But that's the when you kind of strike into the deep expression of it and the real joy of it. And that's when we'll call it the market or people that see it are going to resonate with that piece. I believe people resonate with that piece or song or written word or, again, whatever the version of that is, on a much deeper level, because it was given in that space versus thought of like you creating something, like you're going to create something that I think Paul's going to just like this. Now there is something to be said of creating something specific, but like doing it in the place of that. So, I mean, I guess here I have another thought, but I want to just kind of get your kind of feel for some of that stuff with the creation aspect of it.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I tried creating other things, and since I never felt something internal bringing out the creativity or the artistic, and those words get intertwined quite a bit,
Sure.
thoughts from me, I just wasn't artistic. That was just my assumption until I found glass. And I literally can come in and look at a piece and go, what am I going to do with this? And I just have to stop, breathe a little bit, and all of a sudden it just starts flowing. I can't tell you where it's really coming from.
Sure.
It just flows out of me so easily and so with so much joy and passion that at the end of a piece that I've made, I am so relaxed and I'm in a great mood and giddy. And I have a lot of bad puns and jokes, which flow out quite a bit as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in respect to your thinking of a giraffe, I thought you were sticking your neck out using that idea. But
Nice. I love that.
sorry, yeah,
It fit very well. That's perfect. Yeah.
you kind of get the idea of where
Yep.
I go with my jokes. But here I teach techniques because I want the people to bring their joy and their passion and let it flow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much fun when you can see in someone that moment when it starts. And you just want to step back and be a fly on the wall at that point and just let them go.
Mm-hmm.
To know that I have a little something to do with that is phenomenal. It is the greatest gift.
That's incredible. So the one thing too is that I mentioned too about it, kind of creativity being in a vacuum and sharing. I guess in your experience too, you've created a lot of pieces. I did see your website and you have this gallery, all these beautiful pieces and stuff. Now, do you sell it? What do you do? Because you create this and you create it from the heart and then you offer it to the world.
Yes. Well, my studio has a program called Open Studio, and
Mm-hmm.
the highest level is like a gym membership where you're paying every month automatically, and you can utilize the studio when there's open studio time slots. And I've got 13 artists that are in the gift shop with me.
Mm.
So actually, I guess it's 12 with me. So there's 13 of us. The gift shop itself is full of love and excitement from different artists. And I didn't start that way with the studio, but I saw the need. They don't know where to sell their stuff. A lot of them don't have the time or the wherewithal to create the accounts and to do the photographs and do the marketing. So I said, you know what? I'm going to open up my gift shop to you as well. And I'll take care of posting it and pricing it and marketing it. And it has brought so much joy to these people because they didn't have a place. But I also have a small gift shop at the studio. When someone comes in and they're looking at a piece and the artist is here and introducing them to the person whose art style they like, and for the
Mm.
artist to be able to meet someone who likes their
Yeah.
work, oh, the energy in this studio just explodes. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the best thing ever. And we'll have people send us pictures to show where they put the piece or where the
Yeah.
gift was put at their friend's house, and how it has a new home. And it's because each piece is handmade with love, it's one of a kind, and there's a story behind each piece.
Yeah. I think too with some of it's like the essence of the creation process is I'll create something and it's either given or delivered or it's received, but it's also kind of who we are as the other individual is how it's received because it's
Yes.
perceived and received in different ways. And I guess in that sense, I'll just ask the kind of the dumb question is, I mean, do you kind of see that in the responses with, and you said the stylization of that, but how people receive it is one thing, you know, it's the artist does it with a certain intent, but if somebody else sees it in a different light and you kind of see that as well.
I do see some of it, absolutely. I mean, just sometimes the design, a lot of them are abstract, but some of them are designs, and
Hmm.
people will see something in it that we didn't see.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
artist will
That's
look at it
exactly.
again and go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I had done that. I didn't realize I had put it that way." And again, everyone just gets so excited because everyone who's in the studio has to go look. They have to be part of it at that point. It just draws everyone in, which is so much
Yeah.
fun.
It kind of almost makes you think of like, it was almost meant to be for that person that ends up with the piece. If they see something the artist didn't, it was kind of like what you said. It was like, sometimes I don't know where this is coming from necessarily, you know, from a deep energetic level or an exchange or, and maybe it was really, maybe it was never really meant for you. You're the conduit for creating that where it was kind of meant for the person it was meant for, the place it was meant for.
Absolutely. I mean, we
Yeah.
had a beautiful piece that was created by one of our newer open studio people at the time. And someone walked in and said, "That is going to be absolutely perfect in my kitchen, right above the sink. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you have this. This is exactly what I was
Mhm.
looking for." And
Yeah.
he's just like looking at her like, "What do you mean?" It's like, and it didn't even occur to him that he was the conduit, make something that somebody else was looking for. And she has sent us pictures of it in her kitchen. And she has been a real cheerleader for us, which is really appreciated.
That's cool. Because I'll say on the big picture, when you know dial that out from the big wide angle of the creative path, to some level, I mean, on a big scope, that's the creation journey. You know, it's passed through the person, and the perceiving and the receiving of that message and stuff. I mean, that's again songs and writing and everything else in between. It's I think some of the expression too is I do believe, and you even mentioned not feeling like I'm not an artist. I'm not the creative one. There's other people that's reserved for somebody else. And I do believe a lot of people carry that. They're like, well, you know, art, being creative and art, well, that's for some musician or that's for the famous artists that are in a museum or that's somebody else that's, you know, and we all have that. I think that that's one of the big things of being an advocate for just creative energy and creative thought process is so important because we all have I really believe creativity is actually even in the smallest things, in the most mundane things, the tiniest things. They're there. The genius is there in how we do stuff. You know, because the uniqueness that we are, that expression, but we don't always recognize that.
Well, you look at a chef. I mean, you can have
Yeah,
the most incredible dishes from a chef, but they didn't start off that way.
right.
They had to take the first step too. And a songwriter rarely ever has their very first song be a hit.
Mm-hmm.
People who write books sometimes have to write several books till they find their calling in the way they should be writing that meets the needs. So everybody thinks that their first piece should be like a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I'm always kind of reminding everybody has to start somewhere. You have to
Oh,
kind of get a feel for it. You have to kind of understand the techniques and what you need to do. And somebody will walk in and say, "Can I make this?" And I was like, "Someday, yes, absolutely." But you have
yeah.
to start first with the basics.
The emotional capacity, the mental capacity, the energetic capacity, and you're going to be able to get to a place that's right for you.
Yes.
And it's even too like us here. How about this? You and us right now are doing a podcast. We're recording a podcast. This is a voice driven, we're telling stories, we're communicating for this is a form of being creative. This is you know, whether people think it or not, it is a form of creation. And even in stuff like this is like, sometimes we sound really smart and sometimes we sound really not so smart, or, you know, it's like, but to have the courage and have the flow and have the allowance to just understand that this will land or not land with the right resonance, outwardly, there's a beauty in that. And
Absolutely. Well, you think when you go to a party, some people are very outgoing and they're willing to walk up to anybody and just start having a conversation. And other
mhm,
people are more reserved and they're not as open to being the first one to make the conversation. But sometimes those people have the best stories and so much to share. You just
mhm.
have to help them by starting the conversation. You
That's
know,
yeah, I like that. And actually, because you're helping them and you're in the, see exactly what you're doing with your group is you're helping to draw that out in them for their benefit, for their highest and best.
absolutely. I had a fun story where I had a mom bring her daughter and her daughter's friend in. And her mom said, I'm going to go over to this other table. I'm going to go work. Give me your Wi Fi password, please. You just worry about the girls. I'm going to be over here. And I said, if you have to come over and break one piece of glass, it'll take just a couple minutes, but you have to stop what you're doing just for a couple minutes so that when your daughter's talking to you about it, you know what she's talking about. And she just looked at me and I just smiled at her and she goes, oh, okay. She came over and broke one piece of glass. She goes, I'm taking the whole class. And she was telling me that she had this big project. She was really frustrated because she just couldn't find the words, the pattern, whatever. And she called me the next day and she said, thank you. And I was like, for what? Being a little pushy. She laughed and she said, no. She goes, I went home and my head was so cleared and I was so
Yeah,
relaxed that I finished that project in no time flat. I knew exactly what I had to do, took care of it, and it was done in no time. She goes, I just want to thank you because you just pushed ever so slightly, not very much, but you gave me a good reason to come do it for my daughter. So we'd have something to talk about. And she said it made such a difference. So when she's stressed out, she comes in and she's not as
that's
stressed out as she used to be.
yeah,
And she's able to kind of find her moments easier than she used to.
yeah. I think I actually like that just from kind of an analogous or just story driven perspective, even to the breaking of the glass. I think there's kind of a depth to that. There's a poetry to even, just that what you said there is because you're creating something very physical in a very specific and a present way right now. All your focus is here. And there's so much of it that we carry around with us all the time. It's so noisy. And especially too, when you stack it on through different seasons of our lives when, maybe we have little kids or older kid, whatever the version of that is, and there's busy and the work, and the groceries and the laundry and everything else. And moments of being present are a true gift wherever and however we can find that in some cases.
Absolutely. And she never thought she would have found it in glass.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
why she came. She came for her daughter. She had the right reasons, and we've become dear friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I've been
That's awesome.
watching her daughter grow, and taking her driver's tests, and it just, it's so rewarding for the community that's been created and the friends I've
Yeah.
made. And I would say they're deeper friendships than a lot of the people I'd met at work. I mean, I have some very good friends
Yeah.
from work, but the
No, no,
majority,
understandable.
yeah, it's just a
Well,
different.
you meet, I think when you have those experiential moments of when you're in a, I'm just going to go back to the creative space. When you're in the creative space, I believe you're closer to a heart space. When you're in those heart space and you're sharing that time with other people, the depth of that connection is absolutely beautiful. It's poetic because you're both in that space rather than if you're in another arena where it's rigid or if it's chaotic or whatever that is and you're meeting them you're together with them in that space. The frequency is, I think it's too off, but when you're in the true heart space and present, the alignment is much more prevalent, I believe.
I agree with you completely.
So, a couple different things too is I really do have some questions about the glass, but I did kind of want to touch on one more thing. It was kind of in one of your writings too, is overcoming doubt and challenges and stuff like that. And I guess staying in this creative space or making, how about this, maybe even just making a big change. We talked about the creative, we talked about the corporate, but I think there are people out there that want to make a change. They don't know where to start, they don't know how to do it. And I mean, I think there's a lot of these things that we place barriers in front of us, either intentional or unintentional. I believe that we have these things that we build up in our minds, imagined or real, many times imagined.
Yes.
Uh, so,
They
and we are
feel
creative
real, but
creatures.
yeah.
Yeah, they feel real though. They're real to us. If there's something we imagine and it's a lot of stress, it still feels like it's really happening. We still
Yes.
carry that. So, kind of overcoming some of those doubts. There are things like fears of success. There's things of self sabotage, and
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
lot of things that can influence those in our old programming or whatever version we're influenced by. If you could kind of talk about some of that overcoming doubt and challenges.
It's not easy. It's not something
No,
that just, oh, I can just say this to myself and I will suddenly be happy.
right, right.
Wouldn't it be
Like a one
nice?
fit all type of thing, or a questionnaire. Like I could wake up and I can ask these 5 questions to myself and I'll have it all solved.
It's very hard to fight your ego, which to me is also your
Hmm.
mindset. So it's easy for me to say I'm not artistic. And I did it for way too long. I didn't challenge myself to find
Mm,
something that really meant something to me. I had so many excuses. I am great at coming up with excuses why I can't do something. And then I have to step back and go, well, wait a minute. I also couldn't speak, Hebrew, and I learned Hebrew, and I was speaking Hebrew for a year while we were in Israel. And I came back and I was starting to learn French. So that was three languages at the, age of 8. I learned electronics. I'm comfortable switching out the power and switching out my own thermostat or whatever I need to do. And it's one of those things where what do I need to do to be able to do it? Well,
mm,
what steps do I need to take? Can I ask someone? Okay, yes, I can do that. Nowadays, you can watch YouTube and find almost anything, but it's more internal first. I could watch the same video when I'm telling myself I can't do something and I won't learn anything
hmm.
versus watching a video or take a class because I know I can do it. I just need the guidance and the help to get over the humps.
Yeah.
Big difference. And you have to give yourself permission to make mistakes and maybe fail at something because you learn from mistakes and you learn more from failures and mistakes than you will if everything comes so easy for you.
Hmm.
And avoidance is a horrible thing. Avoiding trying something. I mean, I don't know how many things I didn't want to try to eat because it just didn't sound good, or I didn't like the color, or maybe I didn't like the texture. And then somebody made it differently, and oh my gosh, that was delicious. You tell yourself so many things that aren't true every day.
Hmm.
And it's learning to stop and say, I don't need to listen to that part of me. I know better. I can do this.
That's awesome. And I like that you touched on too. There is the inner work. There's of course the action, but there is the inner work too. I can totally relate to where it's like I can tell myself all sorts of reasons why I'm not going to do something or I don't want to do something or why it won't work or whatever it is. I think we all do that stuff. And in different arenas too. We're beautifully complex creative creatures, and I think we can show up in different ways, and in love and money and relationships and communication. And some show up strong here, and over here we feel broken and stuff. So it's not necessarily like a one fit across the board, but I think in small ways we definitely implement those little excuses or those little made up barriers to not try.
Absolutely. And I find where it happens a lot for a lot of people is that someone speaks to you and they use a phrase, a tone, or something,
Mm.
and it just sets you off. And I see it happen over and over again. And I catch myself, it happens to me too. And I'm fully aware of it. But I have to step back, where are they coming from? Maybe somebody just did something horrible to them. Maybe something just happened to them. Maybe
Sure.
they don't even realize how they come across.
Yeah.
And that's what's more common than anything else. They have no idea that they're a bit rude or they're a bit aggressive or their tone
Mm.
isn't right. They don't even realize it. But we have a tendency of assuming they're fully in control of everything and they know it all and they're doing it on purpose to me.
Hmm.
And then you find out they didn't have a clue and they feel bad when they find out something was like that. And
Yeah.
sometimes you never get a chance to ever have a real conversation with a person to find out, you don't always,
That's true. Yeah.
you're not always
Yeah.
going to go up to them and go, why are you being rude to me? But
Right.
you can talk to them about something else, and you'll see a lot of times it was something that had happened recently to them, and they're carrying that for way too long.
Yeah.
And when you're
Yeah.
kind to them, usually that barrier comes down. And it's amazing what kindness can do to somebody else and for
Yeah.
somebody else. And the for somebody else is more important to me. It can help them in some way, then I'm going to give them all the kindness I can without being over the top.
Sure, sure, sure. But having the
Compassion.
being really good at compassion, yeah, and that empathy and just the understanding that there's just not being quick to judge or jump on it and stuff like that. And it's hard, especially things you think about like a road rage type of situation, or you think about a conversation where somebody, again, they're rude or they're easily triggered by something and it has nothing to do with you, but it's projected onto you because you're the person in front of them,
Yes.
and they're snarky or quick or whatever, whatever version of that is. So, but yeah, no, I completely agree. And so I want to make sure that I have enough time to actually talk about just specifically the fused glass. So, and I know I could see you get lit up. So I didn't, I kind of feel like I held back, but I didn't on purpose. But so again, there's stained glass, there's all these different, or there's sea glass and all these things, but the fused glass, I mean, it looks really fascinating. So tell me a little bit about the fused glass, because I'm
I
thinking
keep
of
the lights
things
off
like
of it.
stained glass where they get joined by a different element or material. Fused glass, is it glass on glass or
It's a lot of different ways of doing it.
okay?
Basically, with blown glass, it's about 2,000 degrees and you're working in the heat all the time. Stained glass, you're pretty much going to use either lead cane to outline it and put it in between the pieces, or you're going to use foil and a soldering iron. Fused glass is all done at room temperature, and it goes into a kiln between 14 and 1500 degrees, depending on what firing schedule you want. So we have a tendency of building everything on a blank piece of glass. And in classes, it's usually clear. And you take pieces, you break them. It's technically cutting, but you're not
Okay,
using scissors. So it's a
okay.
different technique to be able to
Do you
break the
do you
glass apart.
score it?
Right, exactly.
Okay,
And I do it.
like it's
Yes. And I have a
yeah, okay.
T-shirt that says I know how to score. So, just to keep up with my sense of humor. But yeah, it's a controlled break. And when you can start to control the glass and have it do
Yeah,
what you want, and
yeah.
then you put it in the kiln. And it's about, 14, 15 hours, depending on the cycle. And you open the kiln and the glass has become molten. Thick
Okay,
honey, depends on how much, depending on the temperature, and it fuses the glass together. But it's like scuba diving, you have to have safety stops because you want the whole piece to be the same temperature before it goes to the next level. So you don't have
okay.
thermal shock.
Hmm.
And glass has what they call a coefficient of expansion. It's the rate at which it's going to expand and contract with heat and cooling. So
Okay.
not all glass can work together. So there's quite a bit that don't fuse well together. So I can't use blown glass or stained glass at all with
Mm.
my fused glass. And there's a couple of different numbers that go with that coefficient of expansion. I buy all my glass from Bullseye Glass Company. Yes, it's a cheap pitch for them, but I'm so impressed with them. They're one of the last US based glass making companies around. And they guarantee that all the different types of glass that they make will work together.
Hmm.
When you start mixing them, I mean, it literally starts out at the 2000 degree in the blowholes, and it's pulled over to a table and it's poured, and sometimes another color is poured on top, and it's mixed and shoved with heavy tools and big gloves because it's so hot. And then it's put through a roller to make it into a sheet of glass. And it's got to cool off, and then it's got to get transported around the studio, and then it's finally packed and it's shipped in crates, and then it's unpacked here. And there's all kinds of temperature changes happening to it, between hot trucks or cool weather. Um, Glass likes to be with, normal warm temperatures. It doesn't like the freezing temperatures. So you want to warm it up a little bit before you try to work with it. But it
Hmm.
can break on its own.
Yeah.
Luckily enough, that doesn't happen very frequently, but it can happen. And so we're teaching those types of techniques. We're teaching the types of thing, not how to actually make the glass. But once we have the sheet glass and the other glass, how to put it together. I have them put a little bit of glue so it stays the pattern they want while I'm carrying it to the kiln. And then the glue actually burns off at about 500 degrees.
Okay.
And so the glue doesn't even
So that
stay.
material is gone then at that point. Okay.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's almost always fired flat first. Try to say that
Hmm.
3 times fast. And then if you're interested in having a shape like this particular tray,
Ooh,
it
that's
has
cool
shape in
too.
it. That is fired again. And it is
Okay.
fired at a lower temperature so that the design doesn't go away.
Got it. So those pieces don't separate
Separate.
or anything?
Nope.
Okay.
It's a lower
Yeah.
temperature. And this would be a slump. So it laid flat across the top of a mold and slumped into the mold, which had the
Mhm.
shape in it.
Real quick, when you were talking about how they make the glass, I identify with that glass very heavily. Getting beat up, getting shipped around, getting cracked, hot, cold. I was just like, I felt like certain seasons of my life.
Yes.
I think
Yes,
we've all experienced those. So
absolutely. Most of it's food safe, which is
is
really
it?
cool.
Okay.
So
So
we
yeah.
do a lot of things for people as gifts. We do commission work as well. So
Yeah.
if we have a gift shop, it's part of our website. And if you see something that you really like, you can tell us what it is. And if you want a different color palette, we will
Oh,
not
nice.
make
Okay.
exactly the same thing. We don't
Sure,
make the
sure, sure.
same thing twice, but we will make something very similar. So a lot of times friends will go, like a friend gets a new house, they'll go check out what the color palette is for their new kitchen, as an
Yeah.
example. And they'll call us and say, can you make, such and such a plate, which I really love the shape of, the design, but make it in these colors instead.
Yeah.
And we do that.
So when you're taking it in and out of there, I got a question too. Are you using like a sand in the kiln or something like that? Or can it stick to the kiln? Or is there any other, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep. Excellent question. There's a couple of ways of doing it. I use shelf paper, which has a releasing agent. So it goes between the shelf of the kiln and the glass.
okay. Burn off point too then?
It doesn't burn off fully because we want it to stay through the whole process,
Yeah.
but it becomes more powdery than when it first went in, just from being the process and some of the things within it burning off. Um, and then there's a spray as well. So things that are more compact and pushed into something where we use a lot of smaller pieces into a small mold. Then we use a spray, which has again a releasing agent built into it, but it can handle the higher temperatures and be able
Mm.
to release. I could do it all straight on my kiln shelf, and there's a chemical that we basically paint onto the shelf, but I'd
Yeah.
have to do it quite frequently. And with the amount of time that these kilns are running, it wouldn't be good use of my time.
I'm sure. Because there's probably, well, you have to probably wait for the cool down at that point
Well,
then
everything
too. Right?
cools down before we take it out. So
Okay.
we open the
Got
kilns
it.
when they're room temperature, and so we're never touching the hot stuff. Yes,
Yeah.
there's some
Okay.
exceptions where you can touch hot stuff, but 99% of the time we don't. It's all cool when it goes in. It runs at night when the rates have gone down with the electricity, so we're not taxing the grid, and it's going to be there for my children and
Sure.
grandchildren. And I walk
Yeah.
in the next day. We open if there's other people in the studio, it's a game. Everybody wants to see the kiln when you open it. It's like Christmas morning. You get to see how beautiful because the glass is now softer. It's got more shine. The edges
Yeah.
are even, and the little imperfections are pretty much gone. I mean, they're there, but they're not as obvious. So you
Okay.
might know where you had a little imperfection, but to the person sitting next to you who looks at it, they don't see it. They see the big
Yeah.
picture, not the little pieces anymore.
I was going to ask about the smaller, like a mosaic or some. You can do like the little, like tinier pieces, smaller little pieces without the integrity or without it kind of not necessarily fusing correctly, or
Absolutely.
is that
Oh,
okay?
absolutely. In fact, we have one of the artists, she does animals. So if you provide her a picture of your animal, and she's done horses, dogs, cats, birds, a chicken, um, oh, it wasn't a pet, but she's done a giraffe and an elephant
The
and
giraffe. There
a
was a giraffe or something
zebra.
like that. Yeah.
And so there's other animals she's done, but mostly her focus now is doing pets. And she has a
That's
parakeet
cool.
on her workspace right now. So she's got the picture of the parakeet and she's building it with all these little pieces. and
Yeah.
it's stunning. I mean, her work is just, I haven't seen anything like it from other
Yeah.
artists.
Isn't that cool when somebody kind of, I don't want to say breaks the paradigm, but kind of just shifts it into their own. Can you do layers? Can you stack them? Oh, okay.
And what happens if after you stack maybe two or three, then we start changing the firing schedule a little bit so that it goes a little slower, so it gives more time for all of it to get to the same temperature.
Got it. Because I would almost imagine too, and this is me guessing though, some of the weight, I guess if you went too, because you could have some compression or something like that too.
Yeah. And we have to be careful for air bubbles between things too.
Mm,
So
okay.
that's
Nice.
probably one of the biggest issues is air bubbles. Sometimes you like them, and sometimes you force them to come on purpose, and other times not quite where you wanted to bubble.
Yeah,
But
I could see
again,
that because I like working with wood and I
okay,
just love the grains.
yes,
If you kind of plane something down and it just really exposes this beautiful collection of knots, and there's really something to that. But it might look unfinished to somebody else, but while you're looking at it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful.
you can make a beautiful stand out of wood that you can put the
Hmm.
glass on.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, have you ever had anyone like maybe yourself or something just come out like a total dumpster fire? You're like, wow, this really just came out terrible? Or is it all just that being beautiful in its own little way?
No, we've had pieces we didn't like, and what we've done
Sure.
is we take a hammer to it, we break it, and we make something else out of it. And we
Oh,
call
there you
that
go.
making
Okay.
lemonade. And that's what
Nice.
happens as well when something breaks in a kiln. We just make
Mm,
something else out of it. It can be refired multiple times. It doesn't like being refired at the highest temperature, more
okay.
than probably four times at the most. But there's so many different temperatures in between you can do. And
Yeah.
I have to tell you, more times than not, what we make out of lemonade is pretty amazing.
I could see that. It's the unintended result. It was actually what really wanted to be expressed in it. You probably heard that with certain artists that work with stones.
Yes.
And they're like, it just, the image of the sculpture came out of the stone. How can people find you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
The best way is our website, which has the class schedule. And again, you need to be in the area for that in the Los Angeles area. We're out in Thousand Oaks, just over the Ventura County line. But Glass Arts with an S, collective.com. And that's what we
Okay.
are for Instagram and for Facebook. And it's at
Mhm.
Glass Arts Collective for YouTube as
Beautiful.
well.
Is there a community, like if somebody's out of the area or remote, is there a big glass fusion community or is it tied up in the larger scope of glass working arena?
Oh, there's lots of communities out there. I mean, Bullseye has their own as well. And there are some amazing artists that have created individual communities that are just wonderful and they welcome everyone. I mean, they
Yeah.
really, I would say, I don't know a lot of artists in other platforms, but I would have to say that the Fuse Glass Arena, it hasn't been around as long as most have, but beautiful people who make beautiful art and who are so open to other people wanting to learn more.
That's awesome. So thank you so much for joining today. This was
Thanks, Paul.
definitely a joy. I appreciate it and stuff. Awesome. Thank you again.